Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Our topic today is how to raise an independent team. Start this off by telling you a little story from yesterday evening. My daughter, who graduated from high school last May, and when she graduated from high school, my parents decided they were going to lease a car. And so at that time, they gave my daughter for her 18th birthday / graduation parent present, their old car. That's the car that she has. And so she's had it since last May, thereabouts. And so yesterday, because it was very warm yesterday evening, we were sitting out on our deck and enjoying, the evening. And she was like, yeah, my car is making a weird noise. I think I have to get it serviced. And I'm like, well, when was the last time you got it serviced? And she's like, I haven't. And I'm like, you're supposed to get your oil changed every like 3,000 to 5,000 miles. She's like, oh, I've done like 10,000 miles. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, we need to take care of that. And you need to take it in. And she's like, oh, how do I do that? And I'm like, you go to the place and you say, service my car, please. And they'll tell you if there's something wrong with it. I have this moment of like, how timely talk about how to raise an independent team, because there are some things that you think you're doing a good job teaching your kids. And then when they grow up and they become older and they ask you questions and you're like, oh, how do you not know how to do that? Wow, I just assumed you would know. So, and we're not going to hit all the things because there always will be something that will come up and surprise you on what you didn't teach your teenager. And then they will ask you later and you'll be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I didn't teach you about that. So there we go. That's our topic today.
Absolutely. It's so funny that happened because yesterday I was driving with my son. He's had the car. We gave it to him about a month ago. And yesterday he says, it says I need an oil change and to rotate my tires. I checked the code and I was like, okay. And then he like staring at me. I'm like, oh, are you asking me to pay for it? Like, what's happening here? And he's like, I go, oh yeah, when we gave you the car, like, obviously if it's like very expensive, but he just started working a couple months ago now. And we're like, oil changes aren't that expensive. That's just something that you're going to have to incorporate into your budget. And he's like, oh, you mean on top of gas? I'm like, yeah, on top of gas. So they're definitely learning the value of a dollar. It's funny because I printed out this presentation from last year and I'm reflecting on it because I'm reading notes. Last year, my kiddo was a 17-year-old who was still in high school, ready to go to college and totally dependent. And so to see the transformation that's happened since he went, Jay, wait till you tell him about car insurance. Yep, he's paying that already. So we divided that up into 12 payments and he's not happy about that either. So, but just to see the growth in the last year, in a lot of it, he did on his own, thankfully. But it was definitely this process of like, I was so worried about sending him off into the world. And some of these things just kind of, he figured it out for himself, but there were definitely things I could have done better. My husband and I are very different. We were raised very different. We both came, our dads were like, these blue collar guys. Both of them didn't make a ton of money, but the way they raised us to think about money was very different. My husband has this like amazing work ethic. He's been working since he was allowed to work. He got his work permit at like 15 and a half, and he was working at the equivalent of Sweet Tomato, which is like a salad bar place. And, he paid for prom, he paid for his senior pictures, he paid for the Disneyland trip in high school. He paid all these things from his job. He paid for college. He bought his own car. This is all stuff happening before he was even 21. He was making like $4.75 when he saved up for my engagement ring. Like this is like long time ago. So he knew that his dad worked really hard, but he knew that he wanted to work, he wanted to make money. He didn't want to be poor. What does that say? I didn't see that one.
As my daughter originally thought oil change was when you buy a new can of WD-40. I'm surprised she knew what WD-40 is. I don't think my kids would.
So. She's like spraying the car. I love it. So my husband just knew the value of a dollar, right? So my end, my dad didn't make a lot of money, but he worked so hard to give us everything that we wanted. He was the dad that like, I wanted to go to Great America and he would just hand me 20 bucks. I wasn't forced to work. They said if I went to school, I wouldn't have to get a job. My dad bought me a car. He paid for my gas. He would take my car to get oil changes. I was kind of spoiled by my dad. And so we come together, and obviously our thoughts about money and saving and retirement are totally different. The way we raise our children has been totally different. I am kind of more the enabler, the one who does everything, even still. And my husband's always wanted to like take a step back and let them grow. And that was really hard for me because I'm like, you're so mean, like just help them with this and help them with that. And now as they're getting older, I'm realizing like, okay, maybe I didn't do things the right way. I worked at a restaurant when I was 18 years old, and it was a restaurant inside of a mall. And I would literally take my tips after work and go into the mall and buy an outfit every single time. I never saved money. I never had to, like, I didn't have anything I needed to pay for. So I'm more aware now, obviously, as an adult, of like what needs to be done and what needs to be handled, when it comes to like retirement. But we have a guy that helps us out with our money, and one of the jobs is for him to get us to kind of come to the same like compromises when it comes to money and understanding that. So I've come a long way, and I'm not sure I've taught my kids well enough, but here we are. So I just think the way that we were raised really like speaks volumes about how we're going to parent our kiddos. So I want us to reflect a few minutes on what kind of things do we do for our kiddos that maybe they should be doing on their own. So this part is not intended to be judgmental. This is just, I want you to reflect on the things that we do for our kids. And I think a lot of times we want to give them the freedom and the time to do schoolwork, so we'll kind of pick up the slack, right? I don't know how many of your kids have to do chores. I don't know what responsibilities they have in the house. So this is funny because I'm looking at this list I actually wrote last year, and this is the things I do for my 17-year-old. And I'm like, oh my gosh, no wonder I have more free time now that he's in college. So it says, yesterday I went into my 17-year-old's room and yelled at him to get up 5 times yesterday. I ordered his Starbucks because he was too shy to do it for himself. I brought him snacks. This is all during distance learning. I brought him snacks throughout the day in his room. I applied for a job for him at Target.com. I cleaned his bathroom. I put his clothes in the dryer because he fell asleep before the washer was done. I paid him $10 to clean my car, and I gave him the money even though it was the worst job ever. And I'm looking and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I created the monster that was like existing on his own in September. And so just wondered, like, what do you do for your kiddos that they should probably be doing on their own by now?
Well, let's see. Yesterday I got home and my son was like, Mom, make me some mac and cheese. And I was like, and I always said like, well, can't you make it? He's like, no. And then I am like, and then did I make him the mac and cheese? Yes, I made him the mac and cheese. And like, he can boil some water, and it's not difficult to make. He can read the instructions on the back. He does know how to read. Yeah.
Because you get torn between that, like nurturing, you want to like nurture them and you miss them when they're at school and you want them to like, versus him doing nothing on his own. Oh, my daughter's been driving for 2 years now, and I still wash her car for her and gas fill up. That reminds me of my dad. It's hard because that's so sweet and you want to do those things.
Yeah. It's I feel like with my husband, we're probably the opposite of you, Yvonne. I feel like my husband's much more of the nurturer and enabler, and he will like, he's just the type of person that like, if you ask him to like, oh, can you grab me a soda? Like he will bring it to you and open it for you and give it to you with a napkin. Like it's like a whole like ordeal. And you're like, oh, you just had to toss me in a can. Like, and so like, that's just his way. And I think my kids, they I definitely have come to expect that. And so, yeah, I mean, do they have chores? No, not really. I mean, occasionally we'll be like, Nathan, you have to pick up your Legos. You have to clean this up. And so he will, but we're not terrible. We're not great housekeepers ourselves that this is something, it's not like I'm slaving away and cleaning the house. So I feel a little bit better that I'm not asking them to do that sort of thing.
Sylvia says, I still do chores for my son. He puts it off for so long. I feel like that's a great tactic for teenagers of like, if I just don't, somebody will, right? If the dishes are in the sink for so long, at some point, I'm just going to be like, forget it. We don't really have structured chores. One kid is supposed to clean the litter box for the cats, and one kid is supposed to take out the garbage. I have not had them do that without being asked, like ever. So is there anyone here that has kids that actually do chores consistently? I would love for you to speak up or throw it in the chat. Like, is there anyone here that has been successful in establishing rules and expectations for your kids to do chores? And do they do them? And if so, what is the secret?
And do they do them without you yelling? Like, you never have to, like, they just do it. That's a miracle. It's silence. We're all in this together. That's good.
Yeah, it sounds like we're all in this together. So I had wrote this list of like things that like I feel like they're supposed to be doing. And so just kind of reflect with yourself, like, is this something that your kiddo is already doing? And I'm talking freshmen through seniors, like all of them. Like, you know, we tend to kind of baby them when they're younger, and then, you know, we expect that things are going to be different, and then they're not. And then you have a 17-year-old that's having you order Starbucks for them, right? Do they do their laundry? You can nod your head, Jenny.
My daughter does, my son does not.
Okay.
So is that 50-50?
That's totally 50-50. Do they fix their own snacks? Do they wake up on their own?
Yes.
Okay. Do they ever help out with dinner?
My daughter would if I asked her to.
Okay.
But I never ask her to.
Do they wash dishes after dinner? They're at least their own dish.
They will bring their dish into the kitchen.
Oh, that's you're one better than I am right now.
They don't just leave it on the table.
Here's a very telling one. Do they pack for a trip?
We haven't gone on a trip for so long, Yvonne.
Okay. Okay.
Pandemic, I don't know.
Okay. Do they put themselves to bed, or are you nagging? Go to bed. It's time for bed.
With our son, most nights there's nagging. I assume there's nagging. I'm actually already asleep. I go to bed very early.
Here's a big one. Do they manage their own school stuff and their own grades? Or are you on School Loop every day checking it like the stock market? Do you drop things off at school that they forgot?
No, that's the beauty of working way far from home. No.
I want to hear if anyone is still dropping things off at school that they forgot.
I know you guys are, because I see it in the front office.
So yesterday, my son had a baseball game. Was it yesterday or the day before yesterday? And he brought gray pants, and the team wears white pants. And I'm like, you can't wear gray. It's a uniform. Everyone's uniform, right? And he's like, oh, it's no big deal. So I order on Dick's Sporting Goods website to be curbside picked up during my lunch, white pants. I could have just let him show up with gray, which is what I should have done. And I didn't. Do you call and email teachers to address problems before giving your kiddos the opportunity to settle it on their own? Yep. Do you let them navigate nearby areas by public transportation, walking, bike? I'm reading the comments. The first one is, what's your thought in paying them for chores? I definitely had a system where I was transferring it to their little credit card that's prepaid. They stopped doing chores and I stopped paying. So I don't think it's a terrible thing. I think it's good because then you're teaching them also how to manage money, right? So the app that I use is called Greenlight, and it's like this prepaid card. And basically, if my kids save their money for 6 months, we'll pay interest on top of it. And then I can see what they're spending, and it just helps them. It helps us have conversations about money, and it helps them be organized with it. And it helps me to feel secure that they're not buying any like wild things online. So I'm for it. I'm definitely for paying it, but I also want them to know that there's just certain things that I don't have to pay them for. They're just a contributing member of my household, and they have to do certain things. They have to clean up after themselves. Are they good at that? Not all the time. Jay, what's the secret? My 16-year-old consistently does his chores and helps me in yard work, and you're not paying him? That's amazing. He just knows that he's being helpful. I love that. Bruce says, recommend taking new BART near Great Mall to San Francisco for the day or overnight. Ooh, I would be worried. That's a hard one. For anxious moms like myself, my son's been driving for a month now, and his girlfriend came to town, and he said, I'm going to drive her to Reading for something. And I was like, are you kidding me right now? I was so panicked. But when he came back, he had such a confidence in his driving skills that it was so difficult, but I was so happy that he did it, because now he's got the freedom to go wherever he wants to go. Do the kids get any financial guidance advice in high school? That might be a good Ginny question.
So not formally, no. Most of our government econ teachers, and they're in the economics semester, do have like a personal finance type project that where they have to like figure out how much stuff costs and like that sort of thing. I think all of them do that. But that would be it. There's not a formal curriculum for it where like it's taught at this part. I mean, that's like a teacher being like, okay, you're about to graduate from high school. And I think that's important. So a lot of this stuff, we do really assume that the parents are taking care of that.
Yeah. And then how many conversations do we just candidly have at home about finances? I remember my son was paying for something related to school. Oh, it was an AP test last year. And he had to come down and give them a check. And I left the check blank because I didn't know who to pay it to. So he fills it out. And then the bank lady calls me and she's like, can you pick up the check or write another one? And I don't know if he put the signature. I don't know what happened, but he did not. And he's like, well, who writes checks? And I'm like, well, isn't that something you just know? And he's like, I've never even seen a check until yesterday. And I was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. I just assumed. So it's hard. Like if we're really like reflecting on like, it's hard to know what they don't already know. And some things will just come up naturally. But I was so embarrassed. I was like, oh my gosh, what is it? I didn't even know what he put on the check, but it was bad enough that she had to call me. So I was like, oh, oh no. Jay says, mom does the bossing around. I'm the cool dad. Okay, Jay, if something goes awry, we know who to blame, right? It is fun to be that. I let my daughter walk around the house 2-mile radius for 90 minutes. That's really brave, but I track her on her phone and I still get nervous. I don't know who else uses Life 360, but I love it because you can even see how fast they're moving in their vehicles. And it's free. The app is free. So I have that on all my kiddos' phones. So I love that you're tracking her. She's getting out and building some independence. A lot of people don't even know directions from their house to school. Like if you ask them how to get there, they would have no idea. My daughter has a Robinhood account and buys and sells stock. I try to advise her too. That's amazing. So I have a few, this is 15 life skills for kids. And so some of them my kids know, some of them they don't, but honestly, like seeing my kid from last year until now, he has a job, he drives, he's in college, he's registering for school by himself. He's paying for his car insurance and gas, apparently not his oil changes, but everything else. He's ordering food. He's like talking to strangers. He has really bad social anxiety. So just being out there and having to do these things has been amazing for him. I was very hesitant to have him go away to college. He's not even away. He's at San Jose State, guys. He's not away, but he doesn't live with me anymore. And the growth that I've seen in the last 6 months is actually really hard for me because I feel a little bit like I've been like rendered useless in a way because I was such a like kind of like overdo things mom. And so it's caused me to reflect a little bit on like, oh my gosh, when my my 8th grader is going to graduate in a couple of years. Like, what am I going to actually do with myself? So I started to have those thoughts, because once you raise your kids and they're independent, they're always going to need you in certain ways, but not to the level that they do now. And so I really want to like embrace that and like enjoy that piece, but it's also kind of fun to watch them become adults. Like, how have you seen Hannah lately? I know that she's growing up and doing her own thing. I know it can be nerve-wracking, but what's been your experience?
It definitely can be nerve-wracking. And I think because my daughter's still been living at home this year, she is going to move out in the fall. She's going to go away to Sonoma State. But like just seeing the independence and like, 'cause she, works every day. She works at an elementary school nearby here. She's a paraeducator. And so seeing her like just being responsible and like getting up and like going to work every day and like having that like adult type life, it's been really nice. It's like really like fun to see her grow up and, and then like, but like she still will come to me for advice and like that sort of thing. So I'm not having to do like the little things. I mean, I do occasionally, like this morning, I texted her because I left before she woke up this morning. I texted her a reminder, like, make sure you take your medication today. So, I mean, I still do that and I probably still will do that even when she's gone. When she actually went up over the February break, she went to visit some friends that are going to the University of Oregon. And so that was her like full thing. Cause like, I think that was, no, cause she's had to travel and visit relatives, but it's been a long time since she's traveled by herself. And so having her like deal with airports and like that sort of thing on her own. And like, then like getting to Eugene and like getting an Uber from the airport. And of course she uses my Uber account. So I know that like, I'm like tracking it and making sure that she's like, it's okay and that they're not going to kidnap her and all that stuff. So it's been a really nice thing to see. But when she was I forgot what my point of my story was. When she was visiting this friend of hers, she's like, oh, my friend's mom. And I'm just sharing the story. I was going to save it for you guys for another topic, but I thought it was so sweet. She said, my friend's mom texts her every morning that she loves her and that she hopes that she has a great day. And I was like, is that something you want me to do when you go away to college? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, okay. I just thought that was so sweet. So I will remind you guys of the story when we talk about like the emptiness and like when our kids move out and how we deal with that. That they still
so hard, you guys. It's so hard.
They still want that. They still want to know that their parents are there. Like
we complain about them from like day one, and then when all of a sudden they're gone, we're just like, what like happened? Well, I just wish for 1 minute that whatever, but they come back. I bug my parents all the time. I was just thinking about that. Like, do you still like, I still bug my parents for stuff. In fact, I think my dad lent me $50 like a couple of weeks ago. So Virginia says, is it bad that I make my kids do everything and I step in when they can no longer do something on their own? I mean, I guess that depends on what everything means, but I think they should be pretty self-sufficient. I envy a couple of my friends who've, let their kids explore and do all these things, and they have like more skills than my kids had. But I think a lot of it was kind of stemmed in my own anxiety about my kids' safety and all these things. I'm like really nervous about my son driving around. Yesterday, I let him go to Westmont to pick up my other one from the baseball game, and I was like tracking them the whole time. So I think if you're comfortable with it, and the more they can do, the better. But I love that you said you like step in when they can't, and hopefully they know when to come to you, right? I think asking for help is a huge skill that we need throughout our lives. And if they're doing that, I think that's fantastic. Connie says, are there many summer job opportunities for high school students these days? Does Piedmont Hills have any resources or connections?
We don't have any resources and connections. Occasionally, like employers will reach out to us, and if we do, we'll like put stuff up in the counseling office. But honestly, that happens really rarely. But yeah, I mean, are there summer job opportunities? I mean, sure.
Yeah. I know the country club is looking for swim teachers and wait staff already for summer. So that's all I've heard so far.
So usually hiring like even like grocery stores and at the mall and like that sort
Target.
of
Target, they make pretty good money. Okay, so the first one is, which my son hasn't needed this one yet, but learning how to cook, learning how to prepare stuff, something that they haven't done. I'm like, dude, when you guys get married and have children, like you need to step up and do something in the kitchen. So definitely a skill worth having, at least be able to boil some water and make your own avocado toast, right? At least. So I think I limited my kids by doing so much for them that I don't actually know what they're capable of, which probably adds to my worry about, are they going to be okay in the real world?
One thing during the pandemic, I taught my daughter how to scramble an egg. So like, I'm like, you should like, you're never going to starve to death if you know how to cook an egg. So let's.
That's true. Boil it, scramble it, do what you got to do. This next one says how to be a self-starter. I think a lot of kids are very prompt dependent. Like we have to like tell them to do things. So how do we get our kids to be like intrinsically motivated to do things on their own? It says employers today complain about recent grads entering the workforce and needing step-by-step instructions to complete even the smallest tasks. Many of these graduates grew up in households where parents kept them on schedule and hovered over every task. I was just talking to a teacher this morning and they were saying that they had a couple kids who, no matter what the assignment is, they are like asking and clarifying like so many times that it's almost like very like anxiety based, like they don't want to do things wrong. And I think that's the problem when we only are focused on the outcomes and not the effort we put in, is like they're so worried that they're going to do something wrong that they don't push themselves. So pushing your kiddos to like, gosh, like analyze and observe a situation and figure out what needs to be done, you know, and a lot of times they're just waiting for someone to tell them what to do. And sometimes that doesn't happen. And so then they're just kind of there. Virginia says, I have small ovens and an air fryer to allow them to cook on their own without having to use the stove, which worries me. I love that. Definitely get them on that Instant Pot air fryer. Do something.
The air fryer is the best invention. If you guys don't have an air fryer, I highly recommend you go get one because.
Really? I should get one.
Oh, they're amazing.
Okay. I gotta put it on my Amazon.
Everything in the air fryer, it's amazing.
Really?
And they're super easy to use. Yes, your kids can use it.
This is a good one. I think it's how to talk to strangers. In a world out in the world on their own, our kids encounter strangers, professors, coaches, advisors, landlords, store clerks, hairdressers, waiters, managers, just to name a few. Our adult kids need to know how to look these people in the eye, clearly communicate with them, and possibly even advocate for themselves. So huge, especially having a kid with social anxiety, like just the basic skills. I can't tell you enough how many kids I have here who are doing fantastically in school. And I'm so worried that when job interviews come up, that they're going to struggle because they don't have those basic communication skills of like, you know, I've always been like very firm on my kids. Like when somebody comes into our house, we make eye contact, we greet them, we say hello. We want them to feel welcome. And this is what happens when we don't do that. This is how somebody might interpret that. Just very basic communication skills. Don't assume that they have them. Push them to do things that make them practice that skill, because I think that is something that will take them so far. I have some kids that are just like very charismatic and they really know how to talk to adults and they're very respectful. And I always think to myself, like, man, they did something right with this one, you know, and for some people, talking to others is just, you know, something that they're not comfortable with. So I would definitely keep an eye on like, what is social anxiety versus like, what is shyness? They seem to kind of overlap. So it's like, is your kiddo ordering from the waiter when you go to a restaurant? Are they looking to you to do that for them? That's a really big sign that they might be having some social anxiety. They don't want to say the wrong thing. They're embarrassed. But what happens when they get a job, you know, and somebody comes up to them and talks to them and they're looking down and not making eye contact and making the other person feel uncomfortable? Like these things are real. And so really making sure that they know how to talk to strangers. I think we spend our whole life like, don't talk to strangers. And then all of a sudden we're like, talk to them, and you're not talking to them right. And you're like, oh my gosh, you'd never told me to talk to them. So I don't know. I'm sure for you, Jenny, like Hannah's job must have helped. What's been your experience?
For sure. And, she's somebody that growing up was always pretty shy, and definitely struggled with this. She doesn't like it, but she can do it. I mean, I'm the same way. I honestly am naturally a very shy person, and I don't enjoy, even now I'm 47 years old, I don't enjoy speaking with strangers. I do it all of the time, but I don't enjoy it. And um, so she like has gotten a lot better at it. One thing that I did when she was in school, and I think you kind of brought this up, was early on, having like your kid actually communicate with her teachers. And so that was something I always really made sure that she did first. And a lot of times I would help her like write the email, where she
Yeah.
would write it and she'd be like, before she sent it, like, okay, look this over. And like I would give suggestions. So I would definitely support her with that, but I feel like she did that. Now with my son, I feel like we probably do more of that. Like honestly, it's been so long since we've like actually sat in a restaurant with my son that I think I have always ordered for him. Like you said that, and I was like, I in my head, I was like, has Nathan ever ordered for himself? Yes. And I like had this whole like, oh my gosh. So I think we're gonna have to go to a restaurant soon and have him do that because I don't think that has ever happened.
I love it. Yeah, when you don't really think about it, you just do, right? And then you're like, oh my gosh, I never really thought about the fact that I'm the one that always switches the clothes from the washer to the dryer because I don't want them to not have clothes for school the next day. Like all they need is one day of not having clothes and they'll do it, right? But I don't even give them that opportunity to fail, right? This next one is how to independently manage time. Let's face it, there are many adults who can still learn a thing or two about time management. But the more kids understand on how to manage their time, the more successful they'll be. I'm not trying to wake up my kid anymore when he's in college. He has to figure that out. He just started a job. He's working at Big Five Sporting Goods. And on Fridays, they have a truck come in to deliver all of the supplies at 4 o'clock in the morning. And being the wonderful employee that he is, he volunteers this shift. So it was so cute because the other night, it was a Thursday night, and I was like, what are you doing? I like called him to check in. It was like 7 o'clock. He's like, well, clearly I'm going to bed because I have to set my alarm for 3:30. And I was like, who are you? This is a kid that used to play video games until 3:30. So it was kind of fun to watch him like, know like what his responsibilities are. I didn't have to nag him and he's just figuring it out. And so, letting them know that like time management is so important. I mean, I'm a procrastinating queen and that's set me back a lot, right? I know it's really difficult. So I know it's tempting to dictate like all of those things, get up, do this, do that, but sometimes we just have to let them fail to really experience like, how do I manage my own time?
Like, my son looks at the menu for 30 minutes or so before ordering his usual mac and cheese. I think that's why I always order for Nathan, because I know what he's going to eat. Like he's a very picky eater, and I'm like, of these choices, that's what you're going to want. And so like, just deal with it because
I love it. This next one, I feel like I'm even still working on this for myself. And this is something that I really want my kids to have. And it's how to stand up for yourself, how to say no, how to set boundaries. Adults are often in situations where they have to advocate for themselves, asking for a raise, letting a stranger know that they accidentally cut in front of them in line. Has anybody ever cut in front of you in line and you're just like, oh, annoyed, but don't say anything? And then like my husband's the opposite. He'd be like, excuse me, the line's back there. And I'm like embarrassed. Like that's just not my nature, right? Like I don't like to make waves. I'm just like, let it go, let it go. And he's like, no, we've been waiting a long time. And I'm just like, oh gosh. So just little things, right? It's okay to say no. I don't really feel up to going somewhere. It's okay to say I need help for something. I was just telling a student yesterday, like my most powerful lesson in college was like going through a really hard time and asking my teacher for an extension, which I had never done in my entire life. And I didn't want to ask. And she's like, do you need more time for this? And I started crying. And she's like, you are going to be a terrible social worker if you don't know how to ask for help, because you're not going to know everything and you're going to have to ask questions. So you really need to like basically get it together and start asking for help. And that always stood out to me because I'm like, man, that's really, I have to consult with people every day. I always want to make sure I'm doing the right thing. I don't know everything. So I need to like talk to people and, stand up for myself if it's something I don't believe in, like just giving them opportunities to be able to do that before we jump in. How many of us have emailed a teacher angrily, right? I think that if the students tried and then failed and the teachers maybe not being receptive to whatever it is, okay, yeah, we can help by stepping in. But how many times do we just allow them the space and give them the guidance to communicate with the teacher, and how powerful is that skill to have? Ugh, we did a whole segment on this one, how to cope with failure. I've used the term snowplow parent, where we're literally like a snowplow getting all the obstacles out of our kids' way, clearing the path so that they don't have stressors. And what a disservice that is, because failure is such a powerful learning opportunity. The other social worker, Mix Marshall, and we were talking about, we had the same supervisor when we were in training, and both of us did something kind of dumb, and she like reamed us, both of us. It was kind of funny that we had the same experience, and that always sticks in my head, and I will never make that mistake ever again because of it. And had I not failed in that moment, that might not be something that stands out for me. Oh, look, they even reference our book, The Gift of Failure. That was our book club book last year.
And we actually haven't talked about that topic yet this year, because we spent so much time on it last year, but it is not next week, it's the week after we're talking.
Oh, we are doing it. So the quote says, when parents correct their kids' mistakes, they're helping in the moment, but ultimately doing harm. Kids who have never had to deal with failure find themselves unable to cope as adults when a relationship goes sour or a work project doesn't go according to plan. And we see this all the time. I have a senior who, got their first F this year, first semester, and it completely derailed them. And this happens all the time. And it's like not even knowing what failure feels like. And I'm always kind of secretly grateful that it happens when they're in high school, because we're there to guide and support them, and they're not on their own in the workforce failing and figuring out that like, hey, I can get through this. We need to fail. And sometimes when we're snowplowing, we're not giving the opportunity to fail. I should have let my kiddo show up at baseball game in the wrong color pants, where he probably would have got benched. They wouldn't let him play. And I did it because I felt bad and I was worried about him. But chances are I'm going to be washing baseball pants next week because I didn't give him the opportunity to fail and learn from that experience. And that's on me, right? If he doesn't learn. So I don't know if anybody has any stories or experiences where either you let your kid fail and they learn from it, or maybe something recently where you jumped in and you're reflecting now and thinking, man, I should have just let that happen to provide them the space to learn. So if there's anything that you're like, man, I should have not stepped in. I'm trying to think if there's been anything else. What about you?
Thing that I struggle with, especially with my daughter, who's had, as I've shared, like her mental problems, like it's almost like PTSD. Like I struggle with like, oh gosh, do I let her like fail at something, and but then like what if that like sets off like another depressive cycle? And so that's just a really hard as a parent to like, how do you manage that and cope with that, and making those judgment calls on when do you step in and like do stuff for them that maybe they should be doing on their own. Like most recently she's been going through a depressive cycle and got super behind in school, and and she's in college, but and so my husband and I really stepped in, like organized her and helped her, like, okay. And I felt like I was sick with my 7th grader, like, all right, this is the homework you have to do tonight, and like this is, and like I had this like, should I just let her suffer the consequences? But at the same time, like how severe are those consequences going to be to herself? And so yeah, it can be tricky.
Yeah, you definitely want to balance that. I mean, there's times where you just know your kid enough to know that they need help, and I don't think that's the time to like deny them that. But it's hard as a mom because we're so used to doing so much for them, and that's how I show my love to my kids, by like doing things, right?
But did I need to make the mac and cheese for Nathan when I got home? No, I didn't. That was a moment where I could have been like, no.
And now he's gonna be like, I'm hungry. You're gonna be like, too bad, you got to figure it out.
My lesson. I talked about this at school today, and you're done.
Love it. The next one is how to find a job. And funny that I was like, trying to help him find a job at Target last year. And then he actually found his own job. And it was so cute because we had to drive him to the interview. He literally walks into Big Five, is in there for 3 minutes and comes out. So we're like, ooh, like, how bad did you bomb this? And he's like, he asked me my name and why I want to work here. And I told him it was my favorite store growing up, and that it's close to school and I'm ready to like be a hard worker. And he's like, okay, when can you start? And I was like, oh my gosh, you did that all by yourself. Like, I feel like sometimes I didn't give him enough credit for being capable. And I feel bad now. It's like, oh my gosh, he had so much ability. And I was like denying him that because I was not confident in his ability to talk to people. And then when I'm not available and he just steps up and does it, like watching your kid grow is like amazing. So he landed his own job. He, is making money now. And I'm very proud of him for doing that.
I want to read this comment in the chat. I think I'm doing so much for my kids. I take care of all their needs, but they're just so used to it and don't appreciate it either. I think I love that. It's such an honest comment. And I think we're probably all a little guilty of that. This is a great time to like be thinking about this as a parent and like, what could you let go of? And that doesn't mean you're going to do it right away, but this is a great time to like give them a heads up, because the summer is coming when they're not going to be in school, and summer is a great time to train them to start taking over some things. Like, maybe you decide, I'm going to stop doing your laundry. And so you can start giving them a heads up, like, hey, come June, you're going to do your laundry. I'm going to teach you how to do it, but this is going to be your responsibility. Or maybe, they have to start making their lunch, or like whatever you decide, because it's going to be very individual and like your family and like what you need to do and what you need to like, you think they should start taking over. But this is actually a great time of year to start thinking about that and using that summertime as the time to give some stuff to them.
And don't do like I did. It was always like a punishment for me. I'm like, yeah, I'm sick of this. You're just going to do your own stuff. And I'm on strike. I've done like mom strikes. I don't know if you've ever done a mom strike. It doesn't last very long. But instead, like you said, like just letting them know up front, like, hey, this is going to happen, and not bringing it up like a punishment, but just knowing, because I think that's what happens is our kids don't appreciate the things that we do because they're so used to them. Right. And so I'm like, man, my kids are pretty darn lucky. I like come home, I do this, I do that. And they're just like, meh, thanks, And it's not until we stop doing it do they have the ability to reflect and be like, oh my gosh, my mom was awesome. She used to do this after working all day or whatever, doing her thing all day. And I'm grateful for that. But yeah, they get spoiled. My husband's been telling me that for years. He's like, your kids are soft. He always says that. Your kids are soft. I'm like, no, our kids are soft. He's like, yeah, but not because of me. I'm like, whatever. There's a list, and if you Google it, like chores by age group, you will be very surprised, because my kids are still in the preschool category of like, take out the garbage, put your dirty clothes in a hamper. Like those are like preschool chores, honestly. And so I've always like compared them, because I always kind of go back to that chart. You should definitely Google it. It's kind of hilarious, because if your 16, 17-year-old should be doing so many things, and we have them doing preschool chores. So it's like we're limiting them. I forgot, like a preschooler can load the dishwasher. Like a kindergartner can load the dishwasher. They can sweep. They can vacuum. So if that's the case, and we're going by that standard, like what should our 16 and 17-year-old do? In my fantasy world, I shouldn't be doing anything, but clearly that's the case. The next one was how to do laundry. We kind of touched on laundry. Jay says, train them, then they'll postpone doing their assigned chores until you have to do it for them again. My mom will still come to my house and I'll have it all clean because I know how she is. And she will find something to re-clean. Or like one time my house was spotless. I made sure it was spotless. And she walked up to my like mantle and like fixed the frame. And I was like, oh my gosh, like you just can't let it go.
like my dad, every time he comes over, he finds something to like, why don't you do this? Or why haven't you done this? Or what about, and I'm like, the constant criticism. Wow, thanks, Dad.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know what you think about this, Jenny, but this is one of those things where like my mom was always harping on me for like cleaning my room. And my style has been a little bit different. I mean, sometimes it's so out of control where I'm like, whatever, but I'm like, if you want to live in filth and that's like a reflection of you, just keep your door closed. Because it was just like my mom was like microman, like make your bed. Like I still don't make my bed every day, I'll be honest. We just kind of like arrange it and climb back in.
I like my mom harped on me cleaning my room. Like it's what I remember from my childhood about my mom yelling at me to clean my room constantly. And I have just been, like, "Oh, I'm not, I haven't done that."
Yeah, I just don't feel like, I mean, I always tell my kids, like, your space is like a reflection of you. I'm going to show you, like, this is like the reflection of like my week. Usually my desk is like perfectly clear, like, and so I'm very like sensitive to when it's not. I feel like extra stress. And so I try to emphasize that with them. It's like, doesn't it feel good when things are clean? Doesn't it feel good when things are clear? Like, you know, just making sure that they know that there's like a connection between that. But, you know, doing the best I can. But I have to pick my battles. And if I'm harping on him about school and this and that, and then on top of that, like make your bed, like why? If you prefer to sleep like that, I know that I sleep more comfortably when I make my bed and I'm like happier at night, but that's not the battle that I've chosen for myself or for my kids, you know. We try to let go some things before. They'll do some chores when they have time, but when kids get busy with school, we take back the responsibility again, so it's not consistent. And I think it's about like, what are we okay with not getting done? Right.
And I think that that's okay. And I think that's something to model with your kids. And like talk about like decisions that you make. Like when you get super busy and like like things are really, really stressful. Like one thing I do, like that's the day we're gonna order takeout. Like I'm not gonna cook dinner because I've like been so busy. I'm getting home late and like we're just, you know. And so I think that that's like I think we do that as adults. And I think that's part of like, and you know, the whole topic of raising an independent teen is teaching them how to be adults. And like as an adult, sometimes you have to prioritize your list of responsibilities and you say, okay, I'm not going to do that today. This is something I can push off and like do that later because this right now is a bigger priority. And I think that that's totally okay.
Farbot's comment made me kind of sad. And so some of us like me are learning now after having kids that we should appreciate our parents more. My mom was always in a bad mood when she came home from work. And that kind of stands out to me. She was always cranky. And now like being an adult, like I leave and I leave the house clear. I come home from work and if the kids are home or my husband's home and the house is a disaster, it's like almost like a slap in the face. Like you don't appreciate what I do. And I think about the messes that I left for my mom and how she would come home and do that. And then I would be mad that she was in a bad mood. And then she still cooked dinner and did all these things. And I'm like, I'm sorry, mom. I get it now. I fully understand. But yeah, our parents did a lot and we do a lot. And now we're learning what that like underappreciation feels like. Maybe our kids will be 25 and they'll be like, oh my gosh, I had the best parent ever. I always tell parents like when I was 16, my mom was not my favorite person because she was always like nagging me. And then by the time I turned 25 and had children, she was like everything I needed. So relationships change. And, you know, I'm very grateful for how hard she worked. And I appreciate now that I get why she was mad when she came home, you know?
Yeah. I like this comment about kids are trained to do their own laundry if they forget they will have the same clothes again. I think that's actually a great thing to like, the laundry is a great thing to as a parent, like I'm taking away that and like that's going to be your responsibility because what's the worst thing that's going to happen? They're going to wear dirty clothes. It's fine, whatever.
Yeah. And that might be something that's very important to them, right? Like showing up for school dirty and then they're going to learn like, oh my gosh, that was embarrassing today that I think my sweater stunk, right? Like we're still in the phase of like reminding you to wear deodorant and wash your laundry. So like that's on you if you're the stinky kid at school. But I think laundry is definitely something that was not one of my battles. And now I'm like, I was like always buried in laundry. My kids could have been doing that because it's literally a preschool chore. So this next one is how to take care of things and be organized. And I think this is something that will just naturally occur when they start paying for things. There are things now where my kids could not have cared less. And now that my son's buying his own things, he's very particular with where he keeps them, how he stores them, whether or not he loses them, because he knows the value of a dollar. And so I think the best thing we can do is teach them like the value of a dollar and like our hard work. And it's kind of cute to see my kid now like, man, you guys pay that much for the house and you pay for this and this and this. Like, I can't even imagine. I only make $600 every 2 weeks or whatever. And so it's kind of nice to like, he's learning how much things cost. And this is a really yucky time to figure that out because, gas is obviously very expensive, but I think he's figuring it out. And so I don't know how much you can influence how they take care of their things or how organized they are. We can try and we can model that. And I like I said, I like to like connect the like feelings of calmness when my things are organized and clean. And they know that like it does feel really good.
This is why it can depend greatly on the kid. If you guys remember, I had our school psychologist way back in the beginning of the year talk about executive functioning. And so if your child or you has any sort of executive functioning type issues, this can be something that's very difficult. And it's very individualized about what works. And so I think teaching your kid to experiment with what they need to do to stay organized. I have, different things like I have my electronic notebook here that I have. This is how I keep my emails and what needs to go in the newsletter. I keep this list and I have 3 columns, one for staff, one for parents, and one for students. And like, this is how I remember like what I need to do, because I will not remember on the weekends, or if I'm super organized, I write those emails on Friday. Because I like to not have to do it on Sunday and I can just press send on Sunday. But I'm not going to remember everything. And so, but that is something personally, because I do have ADHD and it is something that's difficult for me. Every job that I've had to organize myself differently because I had to meet what the needs of the job were. And so it's been different. And so I think that's something to, like, they're going to have, like, you can give them suggestions and tell them what works for you, but this is something where you're going to have to really support them and figuring out what's going to work for themselves, because what works for me isn't necessarily going to work for somebody else.
Right. And be honest about the things that you do struggle with. I struggle with time management. I struggle with having the energy to like cook dinner and do all that stuff when I get home. Like, that's like normal. So I never want the kids to feel bad when they can't do something or when something's challenging. So just being honest and modeling, like, model your struggles, model the things you do well. We all have our strengths. Our kids all have their strengths. My kids are already way better with money than I was at their age, and probably still better than I am with it. And, just picking our battles. The last ones were just spend money wisely, how to drive safely and take care of cars. Learning that one. You got to change the oil and rotate the tires. They don't just keep driving forever. And yeah, that was a hard one. I never really thought about it, right? My dad changed my oil and pumped my gas, and now it's like, oh my gosh, my kids are doing this and I didn't teach them that, but they figure it out. So I don't want you to worry too much, because they do just kind of figure things out. But the more that we help them now, the easier that transition into adulthood is going to be. And it's really actually beautiful to watch them grow up and feel like you did something right. He got a job and he gets up in the morning on his own. Like, so if they're not there yet, just think about the things that you can be doing right now to help get them there. But don't be too hard on yourself. We do the best we can, and there's no parenting manual.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, that's a great way to end. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this topic. Next week, we're doing a topic we have not discussed before. We're talking about sexuality and gender. So this was actually suggested by my daughter as a good topic for us to address this year. So I'm excited about it.
I love it. Mixed martial is definitely going to help with that one. That is her area of expertise.
All right. Awesome. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful week. Bye-bye.
Bye.